Hello, good evening. It's Wednesday and tonight is PM Express Corporate Wednesday. For those of you who might already be aware of the IEA debates, the debates were structured in such a way that the various presidential candidates spoke about the economy, social sector, private sector. They addressed development and industrialization and tackled foreign policy as well. Tonight, we're going to narrow down on the economic aspect of the discussion. If you are not aware, a new report shows that Ghana has dropped in its position as a prosperous country. The country lost 9 places to rank 87th out of 142 nations in the 2012 Global Prosperity Index released by the Lagerton Institute on October 30th, 2012. Ghana ranked 78 out of 110 countries in 2011's edition and 90 in the 2010 edition. So this makes the issue of the economy very, very critical. So we'll start by first watching the clips from the presentation from last night's IEA presidential debate. Stay with us.
Insufficient tax revenue is a function of the capacity and effectiveness of the system to collect tax. But we can also know that you cannot collect what is not there in the first place. And therefore, growing the economy is an important way of increasing the tax revenue, because a growing economy yields more opportunity to collect tax. This is the aspect of tax collection which has been ignored. And that is why we say that using austerity measures only makes sure that fewer and fewer people pay tax, because they see the tax as unfair and they cannot afford it. Therefore, one of the measures that you can take is, first of all, to begin collecting the tax in smaller amounts. If you want to bring the informal sector into the tax net, you have to do it in smaller amounts and use local-based people who know the people they're collecting the tax from. Use associations and peer pressure to collect the small revenues of tax. When you do that, there's a commission base, and therefore there's an incentive for them to collect the tax and bring it to you, and they also know who they're collecting it from. But you must have services to go with that tax collection. Many of our marketplaces, when you go into them, are so filthy that you will wonder why anybody has the audacity to come there and collect tax, with people selling food on the ground, when the laws demanding basic hygienic practices are not enforced. So we want the markets used. Enforce the use of the markets, enforce appropriate placing of produce, and also provide other services that make the market more comfortable and give people incentive.
We must widen our tax system. Many a times, we only believe that the particular tax that can earn revenue is taxes from cars, imported duties, and exported duties. The issue will have to do with broadening the tax network system so that tax collections and tax officers are being deployed into the system to make sure that internal revenue pays and get all the taxes from our people. Secondly, we have businessmen who are in Ghana here who do not pay tax at all, just because probably they have friends with political leaders or they have friends with big men in the system. The only resources and revenue that Ghana needs is to generate tax internally and externally. PNC government believes that we must decentralize the system. We must put up a national identification system where businessmen, companies that are in the system, we have a particular data system in which we collectively know who is doing what and who is doing what kind of business. Through that, we are able to identify every individual businessman in this country. Now, we will use the police also to get offenders, law offenders in this country, so that when you offend the nation, instead of sending you to the police station, you pay tax to government. And when we do that, many people will be paying taxes to our nation, and Ghana will be able to have more with revenue collections. Everybody who is a working class and who earns a living in Ghana must pay tax. People who believe that this country is an economy where we want to develop must pay tax. And this one, we must put tax officers to make sure that they go around and make proper collective of our taxes.
First of all, the process of simplifying our tax laws. Clearly, a process of simplification will definitely enhance our capacity to collect. Secondly, reducing corruption in the system, because this is the endemic problem that pervades all aspects of our national life. Corruption within the tax collecting agencies. Thirdly, we want to formalize our economy as much as possible. A large part of our economy is in the informal sector of our economy. And formalizing that economy, the measures that will bring the informal sector into the formal part of the economy will be the avenue for increasing dramatically our tax base and our tax revenues. Because so many people work in the informal sector outside the tax net. And the initiative that was begun in the Kufuor era of bringing about a national identification system, which will then make it possible for us to have a clear record of everybody in our country and what they do and don't do, would be a very important instrument in making it possible for us to have this expansion of our tax base.
There are two types of taxes. There are direct and indirect taxes. Indirect taxes are taxes that affect everybody and are geared at a huge informal sector that we have. Direct taxes are geared mainly at the formal sector. That is those whose incomes are known, like parliamentarians, politicians, public sector workers, and so on and so forth. Everybody knows how much they earn in income, and so they pay as they go. We've been implementing tax reform, which is making tax collection much better. And that is by bringing the tax agencies all under one umbrella. And so we now have the Ghana Revenue Authority, which is the umbrella body over the three main tax collecting agencies. That is what used to be the Customs and Excise, the VAT, and then the Internal Revenue Service. And so as a result of sharing the same database, and as a result of applying information and communication technology, it makes it easier for us to be able to track what the tax obligations of people are. We've also created a large taxpayers unit and a small taxpayers unit. And so it makes us able to identify the different categories of taxpayers and be able to track how much tax is due at any one time. For instance, if you import and pay VAT, import VAT of 1 billion cedis, and then you come and declare at the end of the year that you did 5,000 Ghana cedis worth of business, there's a disconnect. And so it's easy to calculate exactly how much you earn.
Well, you had the presidential candidates talking there about what they will do to increase tax revenue collection. You're welcome to PM Express Corporate Wednesday. My name is Stephen Anti, and I have right with me Sydney Casely Hayford, who is a business analyst and an investment consultant. We also have standing by on the phone line Ali Nachia, who is a tax consultant. Later on, we'll get on the phone to speak to an economist and members of the NDC communications team. Welcome to PM Express, and welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Stephen. How are you?
It's always a pleasure to have you here on PM Express. Now let's get to the nitty-gritties of what they were discussing. The CPP says that it will collect small revenues of tax and then improve the services to go along with it. The PNC says it will widen the tax and it brings in decentralizing the system. It also says that it will use the police to tax offenders so that if you offend, instead of taking you to the police station, we will take taxes from you. The NDC emphasized tax reforms of bringing all the tax agencies together to make collection easier. And the president explained that they're using ICT to enhance the tracking of tax obligations. So looking at all these options that they gave, you think they're appropriate?
Do I think they're appropriate? Let's go from what is there and then look at what can be there. The government decided to consolidate all the revenue agencies under one umbrella. So we have the Ghana Revenue Authority, which is good.
Okay.
It's been long in coming, but it's good because I think, as President Mahama tried to explain, it enables us to share information across the board so that we are able to now identify better those who are evading and avoiding taxes. So that's a good thing, and that's ongoing. That has actually been done, so it's working. The other thing also that is available, which has been done, is the tax identification numbering, where every citizen of this country is supposed to have a tax ID number, a TIN as we call it, and each person is supposed to then go ahead and file its taxes. This will move us gradually to a point where you should be able at some point in the future actually file your taxes online, because you should be able to go and log in, get into your tax ID and actually...
Like it's done in the UK
just
and
like
other
it's done in the
developed
UK
economies.
and other developed economies. And it's coming. It's down the line, but I think that's a good thing. So there are many things that have been put in place that are good for the economy and that will help enhance the economy. The things that have not been done, which probably we should look at, are probably addressed by each of those issues that the other members brought up. And let's start with the easiest. Picking up tax evaders or picking up offenders.
Perhaps we should start with identifying the core problem when it comes to the issue of taxes for this country. What is it, before we can begin to explore the solutions that the presidential candidates are proposing? What is the key problem with tax collection in this country?
There isn't one key problem. There's a myriad of problems. The first one is we don't collect enough taxes, so we don't have enough. The second is the process and the procedure for collecting the taxes is a challenge. The third is identifying people, their places of abode, their places of work is a problem. And then the level of taxation itself is a challenge, whether it's too high or too low. Or
right,
just
Mr. Hayford, I'm told Ali Nachan is on the phone line, so we don't lose him. I'll go quickly to Ali Nachan, who is a tax consultant, and we'll have a word. Good evening, sir, and thanks for your time on PM Express.
Good evening, and good evening, Kesley Ford.
Good evening, sir.
It's great to have you here. Now, we were first trying to identify what the challenges to revenue mobilization, tax mainly, is in this country, and then we'll then look at the solutions that the various presidential aspirants have been proposing.
Thank you very much. Like Kesley rightly said, problems of tax collection are really myriad, but key issue has been mentioned by almost all of them. The informal sector is not only with Ghana, but in every country across the world. The informal sector is one of the biggest areas to subject to tax. And why it is a challenge to us is that in Ghana, we have a very large informal sector. And trying to get at them is a key issue. Then also you realize that, Casey rightly said, the processes and procedures. And you find out that that is one area they were identifying. If you don't simplify the system, already we have a complex issue of getting the informal sector. And then if you make the processes and procedures more complex, you worsen the situation. And you also identify another key issue, identifying the taxpayers. And almost all of them rightly identify that we need a taxpayer identification system where we can track each and every income earner. But like he rightly said, you can see that revenue collection is very low. I am particularly concerned about a provision in our tax law, the Internal Revenue Act 2000-592, which, if properly and efficiently administered, would give us a lot of revenue. And I'm talking about Section 6, subsection 2 of that act, where we are told that if you are a resident person, income brought into Ghana is subject to tax. Now, brought into is defined to include where you earn income outside and transfer it to settle a debt in Ghana, or you transfer it to acquire a property in Ghana, or you buy a movable property and bring it into Ghana. People go out and earn income, buy vehicles, buy equipment or whatever, and bring it in. Their intention is after paying the import duty, that is it. No. You have converted an income into that item and brought it in. So the value is an income that should be subject to income.
Right. So, Mr. Nacha, let's now come back to the proposals or propositions that were put forward by the various political parties.
Yes, that was what I was coming to, because if you listen to what the president said,
yeah,
we have direct tax and indirect tax. So bringing in the items and paying the import duty is an indirect tax. But the value of the item is an income, which should be subject to a direct tax. And that wouldn't be double taxation because there are two different taxes. So that is what I was going to, with the president identified, and if we enforce,
right,
then we are going to have a lot of revenue.
Right. So apart from the president's proposals, I mean, the other parties, Nana Addo and Ayariga and
yes, I mentioned
Dr.
that of
Sakara.
Nana Addo when he mentioned simplifying the tax system.
Right.
You see, because if you take one of the reasons for the failure of VAT in 1995, part of the reasons had to do with the complex nature of the computation and filing of returns. 17.5 looked a bit complex, but when it was lowered to 10%, a round figure, you can just shift a dot and you get the figure you should pay. It makes it simple. You understand?
Right.
And then if you try to formalize the economy, like Nanado mentioned, then you are trying to get the informal sector to regularize their operations. Then they can come into the limelight.
And how can that be done?
That can be done because, you see, you realize that Dr. Abu Sakara rightly brought a good approach to addressing the informal sector. We can make use of associations. I always talk about an issue of the informal sector. What do I mean? The president mentioned that the formal sector is normally caught in the direct tax because you can identify the worker, you can identify the company. But what if we have professionals who do not set up any business, but they are operating on their own name? Let's say I am Abdallah, working as a consultant. I need not establish a business name like charity consultancy. So I can do jobs, bill people, they pay me. I'm not noticed. I'm in the informal sector because I can't be noticed. The informal sector should not be looked only at the type of trade, but a formal business sector can operate informally as far as tax is concerned.
Right, Mr. Nacha, I'll have you hold and I'll come back to the studio and later we'll keep interactive. So, Mr. Kingsley Hayford, you heard Mr. Gachi. What I was trying to put out is that he mentioned when he was addressing the problem of taxes, he made reference to President Mahama's statement, he made reference to Nana Addo's proposals, Ayariga's, and then Dr. Abu Sakara's. But it does appear that all of them have made concrete suggestions and proposals which could go into enhancing our tax collection. Is that what it looks like?
Well, you see, none of what was said by any party is new.
Bad or new?
No, there's nothing new about it.
Okay.
These ideas have been floated for a long time. People have made these suggestions over and over and over again. You need to step back from all of this and identify the real problem in this country. And Mr. Achia, Nachia made a point. You see, the actual implementation of law and regulation in this country is our problem. We have all the beautifully written laws. We just don't apply them. We don't implement them. So there's a law that says categorically that you must have a tax identification number. Not everybody has complied. And the GRA should be on the back of every people, threatening them and making sure that they pay. And we are not doing so. Tax identification registration is free. If you go to the Registrar General's department, you pick up a form, you fill it in. Within a few days, you have a number. Anybody who pays money to a consultant or to a vendor, service provider, is supposed to withhold 15% of that as taxes on their behalf and submit that to the revenue authorities. Those who are paying the money are not doing it. So the IRS or the GRA have no mechanism for which they can indirectly identify whoever it is who has paid the tax. Let's say, for example, this. You give me some work, I perform, and you pay me. You're supposed to withhold 15% of that money.
As tax?
As taxes. If you withhold it and you submit that to the IRS now has a link between you and me, because you have said that you've paid me
so they
much.
should be able to verify whether
yes,
indeed
so the
I paid
85% which came to me, I'm supposed to declare that on my income tax return, or I'm supposed to show that I've collected that money. Now, if I don't do it, the IRS can come back and say, well, tell us what happened, because as far as we are aware, you have a withholding certificate for 15%, and you should apply that to the taxes that you pay. So they can track you and they can find you.
So the real problem is the implementation of the existing laws.
Yeah, the laws are there. You just have to apply them and make sure they work. And when you have organizations and institutions that are under-resourced, they don't have the manpower, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the technology to actually track these people, then it becomes a problem, because it's too much work to physically walk around the whole country looking for people and identify who they is. And if you heard what he said, I can be under the radar as a professional person, and especially if you pay me cash, then nobody can track me, because that's a transaction between the two of us. And all that you will show in your accounting is that you paid for professional services, and then it's done. So that's a huge chunk of it. Now, the other part of it, which everybody is talking about and which nobody's actually even attempting to do, is tracking the tax income from the informal sector. And let me do a very simple analysis so everybody can see what I'm coming from. A guy sells coconuts by the roadside. His truck that he uses can contain about 150 coconuts. Now, those coconuts cost him 4 cedis per each coconut that he buys. So he's spending 60 cedis to fill his truck of 150 coconuts. He sells all the coconuts, and coconuts are going for 80 pesos each these days. So he makes 100% profit. So on every barrel, every truck that he pushes, every day he makes 60 cedis profit. This is not income, this is profit. He's paid for his coconuts. This is money that is left to him. He does that for 25 days in a month. His income is therefore 1,500 cedis. And that's in his pocket, not taxed, totally out of the net. If government taxes that money, they will get a lot more revenue in that sector. Now, the challenge that comes in is, how do you go about
taxing
letting the coconut
seller
to understand that he has to go and get a tax ID and he has to pay his taxes
and declare his income and his profit?
Absolutely. And the only way you do it is by making sure that you have revenue people going around identifying all of these and asking them for their tax IDs.
Very interesting insight there. Let's get on the line again and speak to John Gachi, an economist. Thanks very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Were you impressed with the presentations by the various presidential candidates on, the economy? They talked about how to improve revenue. They also talked about addressing unemployment, and particularly they talked about how to make the National Development Planning Commission effective. Altogether, do you think their presentations were spot on?
Well, I think they have done a very good job. They have identified critically that as an expanding economy, we need more tax revenue to be able to finance at least the recurring expenditure of the country. And they have also identified some of the problems that we are facing with respect to revenue mobilization in the country. But as Mr. Hesford rightly said, we have all the mechanisms and we have been able to identify all the problems related to that revenue mobilization in the country. But implementation of those identifiable problems or challenges is our main problem. For example, if we take the 2012 budget, the budget clearly identified that we can get a lot of revenue from what they call gift tax. But as it stands now, the Ghana Revenue Authority is not enforcing that aspect of the provisions in the 2012 budget, which means that all gifts that have been transferred from one person to another in excess of 50 Ghana cedis in the country that did not provide any tax revenue to the state. That is one. Again, if you go to the 2012 budget, it was clearly stated that now professionals are going to be taxed, but no mechanism was put in the budget to be able to effectively collect taxes from professionals, as you rightly said earlier on. And as it stands right now, ERA is not in position to tell us how they are going to mobilize tax from professionals who are increasing on daily basis in the country. So we have identified some of the issues that we can address to be able to increase revenue mobilization in the country. But we are not in position to effectively implement them.
Right, John Gachi, I'll have you hold there. Thanks a lot. And I'll come back to you when we return from a snappy break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to PM Express. It's Wednesday and it's Corporate Wednesday. You can join us with your comments, questions and contributions, as well as suggestions on our Facebook page, facebook.com/joynewsontv, or you can text us 1760. You can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/joynewsontv. Our Twitter handle, remember, is at joynewsontv. Welcome back to PM Express Corporate Wednesday. Now, like his American counterparts, unofficial polls have suggested that MPP's Nana Akufo-Addo boxed his main contender, President Mahama, on issue after issue at the IEA presidential debate, bombarding him with compelling data points on every topic from unemployment to healthcare. Now, we will get onto the phone lines later on the show and speak with the communications team members from Nanado's side, and Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, who is a member of the NDC communications team, and Abu Jinapol from the Nanado side, to lock horns on these issues so we can tell clearly who has the blueprint to take our country back on the course that we all wish it to be. Now, in the economic discussions, one of the issues that came up was a question, that came up was asking the presidential candidates for 3 actions to address unemployment. Let's hear what they said in their responses, and we'll continue with the debate.
A problem of unemployment at different levels. That is because children are graduating from schools at different levels, from the basic school, from the secondary school, and then from the tertiary educational institutions. There are a small category who don't go to school at all. One of the major things that we have to do is to ensure that we provide our youth and those coming out of school with the skills that will make them fit into the world of work. And that has been one of the major problems we've not been able to resolve. We have tried to do that by creating more opportunities in the technical and vocational level, and also turning the National Youth Employment Program that was set up as a job creation exercise into a skills acquisition exercise, so that now there are many modules where youth can go in and acquire a skill. We have an oil and gas industry coming up. Our young people are not yet equipped with the skills to be able to take jobs in the oil and gas industry. And so we've equipped the Takrady Polytechnic and the Takrady Technical Institute with laboratories that enable them train in the areas that will be thrown up by the oil and gas industry. Aside from that, accelerating the growth of the economy would throw up sustainable jobs. And that is why this government is committed to keeping the growth of the economy at an accelerated level. We must grow above 8% to 10% on an annual basis in order to expand the economy enough to be able to create more jobs to accommodate the burgeoning youth. But there are several other interventions that we're making. And one is the Young Entrepreneurs Program, which is the Job Enterprises Program, where young people are going to be trained not to see themselves just as employees, that the only way you can find a job is to be somebody's employee, but that we're going to stimulate their ability to set up their own businesses and also employ other young people.